I think knowing what the designers intended on rules is valuable, even if you ignore the rule, even if you change the rule, you disagree with the designer's intent. It helps you inform what decisions you make in your home game, and I think it is a valuable touch point for discussing how to handle things in a West Marches style game with multiple DMs. The OSR, especially in some places, have a mantra that's rulings, not rules. And a lot of the systems, Shadowdark included, is one of those that will give you advice that's built around the idea of just a core set of things that then everything builds around. There are various systems that are designed to be a start point, and then you mold your game around these relatively concise and clear and quick rules, which is, in a word, wonderful. It's great. I like OSR style play. I've had a ton of fun with it. I think it's very valuable. That being said, I do want to share my experience with you when it comes to this sort of mentality of rulings versus rules and how it impacts things a little differently in West Marches campaigns. And what I want to do is use a actual example from my personal experience. And then I also want to use a hypothetical example that's specific to Shadowdark that's come up a couple of times in the Discord, even over the past couple of days that I've been in as part of the Discord. So in the game we were running, one of the DMs, a guy named Sam, gave my character a flintlock pistol. And I thought this was really cool. He said the rules for the flintlock pistol, which were in the little guidebook that we had, they functioned like a hand crossbow. They took 2 rounds to load. They required a special type of shot, and they penetrated armor, but they had a chance to misfire. It was super cool. Loved it. And then when I asked what chance to misfire meant, the DM told me that every time I shot, I would roll 2d6. And if I got 2 1s, if I got snake eyes, it would misfire and it would explode. I'd have to make a dexterity check, and it might potentially blow off my hand. And I thought that was also awesome. I had this cool thing. I could penetrate through armor. We'd actually just fought like a golem or something that had like armor that was difficult to get through. So I was thinking, ooh, this is a cool use case for it. And that was great. And then later on, I played in a different game with a DM named Matt. And I told Matt about this cool flintlock pistol that I had, and he had not seen one, he had not used one, and so I showed him I was like, yeah, it's in this part of the rules. Sam told me about this and this and this, and he went and looked it up, and he didn't see the rules for misfire. He didn't see how you figured out whether it misfired. And he said, let's not do it that way. The way it's going to work is if you attack with it, we already have a fumble rule at the table. If you fumble on your flintlock, then it explodes, right? So if you roll a natural 1 in the attack roll, it's going to explode. And, I only roll, generally speaking, once, because I'm not going to spend 2 rounds of combat reloading this thing. I roll once at some point during the combat or some point during the encounter, and that's my one shot. And if I know, I have to roll a 1 in order for it to explode, I might save my luck point and be able to re-roll that thing just to avoid that one. So it's like, this is cool. I like this. This will work. This is fine. And then later I played with another DM. And it was about 2 weeks after that, I played with Jamie in his game. And he said basically all of that was crazy because, in his opinion, the pistol should change a little bit based on the environment. And in the system we were playing in, a lot of the stuff that was happening, you decided whether you could do something based on a blank in 6 rule. You could open a stuck door on a 1 in 6 or a 5 in 6 or whatever the chance was. And so he said, what we'll do is if you get a 2 or a 1, right? You roll a d6 with your attack, you get a 2 or a 1, it'll misfire. And he said, but I don't like it'll explode. It just sort of is a dud. It goes poof, and nothing happens, right? And then I wouldn't be able to use it for the rest of the adventure until I had, during a rest, taken the time to open it up and clean it and do all this sort of stuff. And, I thought that rule was cool as well. But the thing was, all of the rules, each of the rules, I should say, was cool, was great. It was a good OSR. Here's some base idea. It has a chance to misfire. How does it work? You figure it out and you play with it. Awesome. However, all of the rules and remembering which rules went with which DM meant that it was just too frustrating. I had a lot of other stuff going on in my life. I wasn't just playing this game. And in order for me to know I'm going to shoot my pistol, what do I do if it misfires? How can I figure out whether, whether it's, do I have to pay attention to the fact that it rained today, whether it's going to misfire, when I pick up my dice, am I picking up 2d6 or 1d6? Am I rolling it together? Am I ignoring the d6s entirely? And when I roll the d20 and the d6, is the d6 for damage? Because I'm pretty sure the hand crossbow did a d6 of damage, which was the same as the pistol. And so it was just very, very confusing. And all of them together meant that I stopped using the pistol when I was playing because I just didn't want to remember who had what rule. And what sucks is that looking back on it, I don't remember the name of that character. I don't even remember what race or class they were. They were probably like a human fighter, a man-at-arms or something like that. I don't remember. What I remember is I had this cool flintlock pistol thing, and people made very reasonable rules, I think. And because nobody got along with the same thing, and because we were constantly switching around to different DMs, I didn't end up using it because it was just too many questions. I didn't want to be that person constantly asking, oh, how does this rule work? Because for me at a table, it is a thing that I don't want to be always asking about. I want to be able to remember and know the rule. I want to be able to know, okay, this is how this is going to work. And if I'm going to play an entire campaign with a flintlock pistol with just Jamie, I can use just Jamie's rule fine. But playing in a campaign where I've got to remember Jamie's rule goes with Jamie, and then Sam's rule goes with Sam's, and Matt's rule goes with Matt, I just don't want to do it. And it takes away a lot of the fun for me. And I think it's one of the pitfalls that can happen with the idea of the rules, not rulings. So that's my example, and I want to talk about a Shattered Arc example. And the example I'm going to use is the gnome racial, where they can go invisible, and the thief has a backstab ability where if you can't perceive them, you don't know they're there, they can just bam, hit you for damage. And there's some discussion about whether they would rule the invisibility to end on attack, like it does with the invisibility spell, or if it doesn't end on attack. And before you say in the comments, I'll get to this in a minute, what the official, unofficial designer's answer is. I did read that as well. But there's some people saying that, no, it doesn't break. Yes, it does break. Or they might say a middle ground of saying, well, your invisibility doesn't break, but backstab says they need to be unaware of you. So you need to be able to be invisible still, and you need to make a stealth check to get into where you're going to go. And all of these rules are fine. Right? All these rules are great interpretations. It's just really simple. Bam, you're invisible. There's another invisibility spell that loses invisibility when you attack with it. And so being able to say, yeah, that's how that works is fine. Or saying, no, this one is written differently, and it's very intentionally written differently. It doesn't end on thing. That is also perfectly valid. But what I'm saying when I'm kind of explaining this sort of issue with rules, not rulings in West Marches specifically is, if you have one of these things, and it will never just be one of these things, it'll be a whole host of things. Having no consistency between tables puts this burden of remembering all of this stuff on the players, which just, it isn't fun. It's not promoting that idea of OSR just being go and do the thing, right? The rules are simple, the rules are straightforward, so we can get in there and go do stuff, and you're encouraged to make these homebrew and house rule things, and having to remember a bunch of different versions of the rules, I think personally goes against that sort of quick jump up and play mentality. And moreover, for both the flintlock rule and for our gnome racial rule here, there is, in some of the campaigns that I've been in, this idea that a DM might end up being the fun one or the boring one or the tough one. And it splits the community sort of weirdly along these lines, some of which are, pretty much all of which are perception based on individual reactions that people had and these sort of side conversations that happen. And once you start having a system where there are certain sets of players that don't want to play with certain DMs because of the way that they rule things differently from other people, either because they don't like the ruling or because they just don't want to remember how 4 sets of rules work, then you're really kind of torpedoing that sort of free movement that is so crucial for keeping West Marches interesting, right? The constantly changing and rearranging party sizes and party groups is important for keeping West Marches fresh. So I've talked a whole bunch about what the problem is. Well, what's the solution? And there's not a simple one. Could you have 10 pages of explanation for every single rule and have a giant, 4,000 page document, just like every Magic the Gathering card that has, a paragraph of rules text and, huge amounts of judges. And you have a test that you give out to people to be DMs for your campaign to see if they're level 1 or level 2 or level 3 judges, if they know the rules by heart and how they're supposed to be. No, that's terrible. That's a horrible idea. That doesn't sound like it's any fun for anyone. But one of the interesting things, I think, is talking to the designer and being able to have that as a place to start your conversation to figure out what you're going to rule for that campaign. There's been several times in West March's campaigns where a rule that we have all agreed upon is not the rule I use in my game, not use in my home campaign, but I use it in the West March's thing because we're part of a community. We live in a society of people that are all working together. And even if I don't like one or two of the rules, I'll still work with that because it's so much easier on the players. It causes so much less tension for people to be able to sit down at a game and be able to start their turn. And they know, if they know the system and they kind of get the vibe of the campaign, they know the actions they're going to take and what roles they need to do and what decision points are going to be important. And I think that has a lot of inherent value. I think it lowers the barrier to entry for a lot of players, and it can keep people coming back, and it can keep people from looking at a game that gets scheduled and going, do I remember how Matt rules things? Can I play my thief in Matt's game, or is he the guy that'll make it break on stealth? And part of the reason that I rolled that thief is because when I played with Sam, I saw somebody do that really cool thing, and I went, man, that is awesome. Sam makes it really cool feeling to play this thief. I'm gonna make my thief a gnome, and then they go to play it, and they play it in Matt's game, and Matt does not use that rule. So the main reason they went to go do this thing, the main reason they were excited to play their character is just not going to happen. That doesn't feel good for anyone involved. And I think it can still be really fun, and it can be avoided by discussing amongst yourself. And how do you have that conversation? Well, I think part of it should be what I said at the very beginning, knowing what the designer intended, right? If what we have is, here's the rule, here's the designer's intention for what we're going to rule this as a group. Even if that designer's intention isn't player facing, right? Even if it's just for the DMs to have, then that is very, very valuable because it can give you a start point for the conversation. And for example, with our Flintlock rule, we eventually did send a message to the guy that wrote the arms ruling for the game that we were playing. And he wrote back. We messaged him on Giant in the Playground, and he said that what he used for the rule was a rule for misfiring in a different system that he was playing at the same time that he wrote those rules. And the rules in that system was when you would roll a d20 to attack with a firearm, sort of the old like blunderbuss style firearms, you would also roll a percentile dice at the same time. So you'd grab all three of your dice and roll them all together. And if your percentile roll was underneath your attack roll, it misfired. And all of us, the whole campaign went, that is nuts. The idea that you have this thing that's based on, these two different variables, and not only that, one of the DMs was like, well, that means you never misfire on a 1? That is idiotic. Like if I roll a 1 on my d20, I will never misfire. That sounds ridiculous to me. And that's fine. That could get the conversation started, right? We could figure out what the thing says and then all come to an agreement on what we're all going to use. By that same token, like I mentioned earlier, Kelsey did weigh in that, yes, she did intend for the gnome racial to be viewed differently. And if you go and you look at the rules for the rules for invisibility, you will see that there's an element in there where it says they have to be able to not see you and not be aware of where you are. And this kind of idea of, okay, well, the ruling might then be, if this is intentionally, right, the designer's intent was it doesn't get broken on attack, then we could kind of put in as make a rule of, we can all agree together that you need to make a stealth check in order to get behind the person, in order to become not only unseen, but they don't know where the attack is coming from. Or you could throw out the rule entirely, right? If the entire campaign, if all 3, 4, 5, 8 DMs get together and say, you know what, we just want to make the gnome attack, the gnome racial break when you attack. That's fine. That's not what the designer intended, but the designer's intent can give you a good neutral starting point, right? That is not Sam's opinion that we're all going after. That is a neutral. This is the baseline that the game says, and let's work forward from there. So that's key to me. And what rule matters the most, or what ruling matters the most, and how this thing works, it's how it runs at your table. What is fun for you? And what I think is important here is if you're running a West Marches game, to understand that there's one extra level on that, where it's not just what is good at your table, it's what is good at your campaign. And that might mean something a little different. And there is always going to be variation between DMs. That is a feature, not a bug of West Marches. This doesn't mean that every person has to be exactly in line. What it should mean is if you're having frequent disagreements, and especially if you're noticing your players don't exactly know how this specific thing is handled, but they know a version of how that specific thing is handled that some other DM has said, and they're trying to make a decision at the table, but they're struggling to remember this extra step of which ruling the DM that they're playing for is using. That's one of those keys that maybe we should have a discussion about how this works. Maybe we should have a discussion about what this specific element is going to be ruled as at every table, so that people don't have this compulsion to try to take the easiest way out, right? If they know that Sam always rules that, yes, your thief has the backstab and you don't have to make a stealth check and you can just do it, you're going to want to just play your thief in that game. It doesn't mean that the player's a power gamer. That just means it's the easiest one to remember and it's the coolest one. So they're going to do that. And if you have a DM that gets seen as the cool DM, then that's going to create some other kinds of problems. So I say all this to say, I think it's important to know what the designer intended as a place to get started. And I've run several West Marches over the years. I've been a part of several West Marches over the years. And I've seen several West Marches games fail, especially ones that I've been a player in or I've been sort of advising on. And I've seen some of the trouble signs happening. I'm like, that's going to be one of those things that we're not on the same page. And then it's going to cause fractures, these little micro fractures in the community that get built around how something should be or how something isn't. And, honestly, maybe there is a version of a West Marches game with 8 or 10 DMs and everybody runs their campaign completely different. There's no consensus on rules. It's just freeform, right? We don't even have a rule system to start with. It's not even Shadowdark. It's just we took the artwork out of Shadowdark and said, think about this and then describe your scene. We don't even need dice. Let's go. Maybe it can work. I've personally not seen that. I've been running West Marches style and these sort of like group style games for many, many years. And I've just not seen that be successful. And I have seen the other side. I've seen the side where you are mindful about the rulings that you're making. You're mindful about trying to keep things simple and consistent for your players. I've seen that pay dividends. I've seen campaigns that, are 10 years old now they're big online campaigns, one of which I'm still an admin for, and then I still check in on and still really enjoy playing with, that uses this massive document to make sure that we're all on the same page. And if we aren't on the same page, we have something to look back on, right? And it doesn't really matter in the moment if a DM gets something wrong, right? They use their ruling rather than the other ruling. You're just trying to get close to consistency. You're trying to make it easy on your players, and you're trying to just get to the action, to get to the fun. And I think from everything that I can read on Shadowdark, that's the core of how the rules are supposed to be, right? The rules are there to give us just the bare minimum of words we need to read to get to the fun. And I think that having a conversation with all of your DMs to really solidify those potential pain points of the rules can do that, right? It can promote that idea of let's get the minimum amount of effort needed for the player to think about rules to get them into rolling dice and fighting monsters and avoiding cave-ins and doing all that cool stuff. So the Shadowdark community has been really awesome to me. I hope that some people there will find this useful. Over the last few days, I've been working on the base rules for my game. My game is designed with the idea that it's a West Marches game first, a system that is for West Marches first, and then everything else is sort of secondary. And so this sort of stuff kind of sticks in my mind a little bit harder. I focus on it, I think, more than your average bear. So this might be somewhat of a me thing, but because I've seen it happen so many times, I think it might be something that if you think about when you're doing your West Marches campaign, it might be beneficial to you. And if you want some more information and want some more stuff on it, Matt Colville actually does a pretty good little snippet on the map, not the territory, and rules are a language. So a language, not rules. I'll link both of those videos down below, sort of further reading. It's sort of where the mentality I'm coming from here is right where it's not really the rules should be written in a specific way or the rulings should happen in a specific way, but rather the whole point is to be clear on your communication. And when you have a group of DMs that are all trying to work together with a group of players, there is an extra level of complexity that goes there, and an extra level of language that can be really helpful to make sure that you're all using the same terms to mean the same things. And I wish you luck in your campaigns.